So last 2 weeks, where am I at? I finished up the text selection stuff. The PR finally got merged. I added some feedback for invalid text in, I think essentially number only text boxes are the only places where they're used at this point anyway. And then after that, I started looking at adding uh, feedback for disabled state stuff across, well, at a hover sound, hover click sound. Um, Kind of just hacked it and using reflection to just see if there's like an enabled field on, and then I'm just like playing different sounds based on that, so I can work on the sounds. Eventually, it's probably that's probably too hacky to actually PR. I'll probably switch it to just using a public bindable or something that the parent can pass or bind to with its enabled state, something like that. Yeah, it's kind of what I'll be working on for a bit, I imagine. The back of my head, I also saw the new notification, or whatever it's called, and I'm not sure if the current notification sound really fits with those, but that's just kind of at the back of my head and something to think about in subconsciously, I guess. Also, the buttons, like while working on the disabled button sounds, I think the button sounds probably need more work. So yeah, that's
I was
just
going to bring
where
up
I'm at.
notifications with you, but it didn't sound too bad, so I just let it go until you
Yeah,
noticed.
yeah, well, I noticed almost immediately, but it I, it has a sound and it's not completely horrible, so it can probably stay there for a little bit. But I'll probably want to revisit it at some point in the future, like alongside as the buttons, as I mentioned, which I'm not happy with. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Oh, yes, it's me now. Uh, things on my side, it's like very, very, very slow right now. I'm still going through some trouble creative block. I didn't work on any specific areas, but went through all of my design and do my fixes here and there. And then I did like small stuff like covers, medals, and things like that. So yeah, that's all I have on my side. I'm gonna continue like looking for things that needs to be fixed. I know there's a lot of stuff needs to be fixed. I'll get to it one by one.
The most recent one that came up was the footer of song select, which someone started in. So if you can take a look at that. Just some of the metrics are a bit weird.
Where? Sorry.
I mentioned you on GitHub, but someone started working on the song select footer.
I I'll look into it.
Yeah.
Okay, so last 2 weeks, I've been actually mostly just going through the reviews for the solo scores change stuff and also fixing my existing PRs. Um, Outside of that, I looked at moving some of the deep web discussion helpers from CoffeeScript to TypeScript ahead of time because those were kind of shared in several other components that I'm going to convert, and like I don't want to convert one component here and then find out I need it somewhere else, so I'm just converting them all now. I did most of those. I think I mostly left the URL ones because those kind of a bit messier than the rest. Updated the Elastic Indexer to read the environment in all caps because that's what we're using everywhere else. Also, partly because I started looking at adding the indexer into the Docker Compose for web, and it definitely would help if the environment was all caps there. On that topic, I also started looking at adding the indexer. I was originally trying to add like multiple files into the compose file so that you could have separate ones for testing and everything, and they would be isolated. But as I went through that, it turned out that at that point you might as well duplicate the whole compose file and just run a separate file, and that would be better than the mess that would have to be into the default file to support it properly. So I dropped that part. Adding the so moving forward, I'm hoping to get the indexer into the compose file, like I guess this week. Some changes probably need to be made to the indexer to have it start properly and not explode when there are no services running, because Docker doesn't do anything about waiting for services to start or whatnot. My goal for adding the indexer into the compose file at this point is to basically just have it in a state where you can just run Docker compose up and it will have an indexer that is working. Like, it's not going to support switching schema versions or anything, because that's a lot more complicated. And if you want to do that, you probably need to have your own custom Docker files for that. Docker compose files. Also going to continue on the converting our Bitmap discussion components to TypeScript. I really want to start on the documentation for the WebSocket messages in the next 2 weeks. So I'm hoping to actually start on that as well. Oh yeah, I also looked at the weird scrolling when you type into the text box on updated Slate.js. It turns out that it's probably not a Slate bug, but a browser issue itself, where it does weird things and doesn't limit the way the component tree it scrolls. So it scrolls your current input text box, it scrolls the parent one if it's scrollable, and for some reason it scrolls the body as well. So as you're typing it, it just keeps scrolling the body. I found a solution for that, which should be working. It only applies to the updated Slate.js because that's the one that has the new behavior. The old one, I don't think it has that, but there are other issues with the old one, like it's buggy on input, and it's also going to not be supported soon because they've kind of dropped support for like everything below 0.1 or something. Yeah, I think that's it for me.
So I started looking into updating the new bitmap page line, and along the way I found that there are quite a few extra queries and duplicated things being written in the JSON due to the new data being displayed on the page, like nominator's name and the guest difficulty names. But when I was starting on moving those things to just do fewer queries, the solo score updates needs to be done, like the new is legacy flag, and that we are not going to display solo scores that comes from Blazor on the web just yet. Like, it will be the same as current one, just the data comes from solo scores instead of OS high tables. And so my current PR needs quite a bit of updates. And as we are going to keep the current legacy score tables, I can just make smaller PRs. That is, so we can just make sure nothing breaks along the way. So yeah, I will be finishing those PRs. It's mainly just splitting things up into smaller pieces. Although I noticed that if we are going to import cores from OS cores high table, we may also need to import the OS cores table for the recent cores, recent place, because those are not from scores high.
Yes, I will keep that in mind.
Also, I don't think I mentioned it in the review, but I think it's probably a good idea to split up the changes where new relations were added to the model and stuff, so they don't clutter up everything else.
Yeah, I will make. I split them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my main task for now, I think. And we'll be back to the new bitmap page design. Still missing the fail times thing. And oh yeah, I think the new design doesn't have user avatar, the mapper avatar. I'm not sure if that's a big problem, but there is just like less image on the bitmap page on the new one. Especially when you collapse the cover, it's like a wall of text instead of a wall of text that's on a cover. I don't know. It feels quite a lot more serious than how the current page looks like.
The cover defaults to being expanded, right?
Yeah, but that like takes quite a lot of space that doesn't really convey any information.
I guess we'll have to see how people respond to that.
Yeah. I guess.
I mean, potentially we can do some kind of like gradient in the background of the cover when it's collapsed to have it like not end but just be behind the information. I don't know. Maybe something to discuss with Flight.
Yeah. I still need to update the back end part of the change versions, I guess. I guess that's it for me.
I think that's everyone, isn't it? Any questions in the very small audience we have? Probably over the next 2 weeks, we're going to do some calc deployments, aren't we, Smuggy?
Yeah.
I think it's getting to that point. It's finalizing the documentation surrounding it, and we'll start to make those happen. Obviously, it can't happen in the next 10 days now because I started these migrations. I don't really want to run that in parallel. But after that's done. Okay, no questions. Well, let's end it there. Thanks to everyone.
All right. Thanks all.
Thanks all.
Yes.
Bye.
See ya.